So to do that, we're going to get into Design Studio. And when you run the client updater on your client workstation, you'll get the icon that adds Design Studio. And then you'll notice the first thing that shows up is a list of frequently used components. If I click here, I get all projects. And then it is sorted by security level. I work for WiSys, so I'm a WiSys developer. The only thing available to you as an end user is the administrator level. So you can see projects that are here. Now these are administrator level projects, other than my little test project here, that are distributed with our product. So you could open up one of these existing projects and add your own stuff to it. But if you do that, and then you later run a product update to update your version of WiSys, if we've made changes to this project, that project's going to get installed again and updated, and any changes or components or grids or whatever you created inside of one of these standard WiSys projects is going to get wiped out. So we don't want that to happen. So what you should always do is create your own project. So I'm going to click New Project down here, and I'm just going to call it Design Studio Webinar. And I'm going to change my security level to administrator. And then this checkbox denotes whether it's a web project or not. And we will be building a web project today, but this is Agility Explorer. So this is a client server grid that we're going to build. So we're going to leave that unchecked. So now we're inside of Design Studio and we have our open project. So there's nothing in the middle here, so we haven't added anything to this project yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a grid. So we come up here to New Component, and this list should look familiar to you because this is the list of things I said we could create. And so we're just going to start with a grid. And again, we need to give this a name. So Design Studio Webinar Open Orders. And I'm just going to copy that, paste it into the description. You can assign icons, these little icons over here on the menu choices, and you can do that by clicking this down arrow. I'm just going to accept the default icon that comes with it, so I'm going to click OK. And now we're into the design tool. And we're building our first grid. So under settings here, there are various tabs here, and again, we don't have enough time to go into all these, but what these cover is things that you can control about the grid. So you could hide the filter, the column filter, not allow users to filter data. You could prevent them from sorting. You can auto refresh the grid and several things like that with these various tabs. So for now, we're just going to accept the defaults and hit next. So that brings us to the Sql statement. So this is the part of the grid where I said you needed to know a little bit about Macola and the data and where you're going to get data from inside of Macola. So if you know SQL well enough, you could just hit here, type, click in here and start typing your select statement or whatever to go get data. But if you don't know that much, you can hit the show table list. And what that does is it opens up all the tables in the database that you're connected to. And I happen to know that we want to work with order entry tables. So all of those in Macola start with OE, ORD. So you can see the filters down gets us a little closer. In here we have the header information, OE ord header _ SQL. And you'll notice that some of these icons are orangish and some are blue. The difference is a blue one is the actual table in the Macola database. So OE order header _ SQL is the order header that when you create an order in Macola, that's where it gets stored. Right below it, the orangish colored one, orange means it's a SQL view. And anything with an _ WV at the end of it means it's a WiSys view. So you may or may not know that WiSys works with every version of Macola. So it works with progression, it works with Macola ES, and then it works with Macola 10. The reason that our software works with all of those versions is because we've created these, what we call normalized views. So this OE order header underscore WiSys view is what allows our software to work with all of the versions of Macola. So if you're designing something and you're running on progression today, and you know that you're gonna, maybe next year you have plans to upgrade to Macola 10, if you can certainly design with just the straight Macola table, but if you do that, when you upgrade to Macola 10, you're gonna have to rewrite your grid because there's differences between the progression OE header table and the ES one. So what you're gonna, if you use the WiSys view, however, so I'm gonna double click the order header WiSys view, and then right below it's the line view. So I'm gonna add these two tables, the WiSys views, so that in the future, if I upgrade, I don't have to worry about rewriting anything. So at this point, you can come through and you could start selecting the fields that you want to see in each table, and it starts building a SQL statement for you at the bottom. This is certainly a very acceptable way to do it, but I happen to be a fan of working in SQL Server Management Studio, and I like to type out my select statement and then execute it so that I can look at my data, figure out exactly what my subset's going to look like, make sure I'm returning everything that I want and everything that I'm looking for. And once I know that I have it all the way I want it, I'm just going to copy it out of here and paste it into here. And I'm going to format my SQL, and you'll notice that it updates my tables, updates the fields that I'm selecting, and all that stuff. And like I said, if you don't have to do it that way, you don't have to design in Design Studio. I'm just more comfortable there. But if you click the Data tab, it will show you everything that it's going after. So from here, we hit Next. And now here's those filters that I talked about when I was showing you the navigation of the grid in Agility Explorer. So if we were going to add filters, this is where we do it. You just double click on what you want to filter on. It shows up over here, and then you give it some specifics over here. You know, the type of filter and what group it's in, the caption, the name of the filter, things like that. So for this example, we're not going to add a filter. I actually filtered in my select statement because I put a where clause on here. I'm only going after status 1 orders, which are booked. So no need to filter our data because I took care of that in my select statement. And then again, this is where you would define buttons that we saw on the Agility grid, the link bar at the bottom. You know, you can put it on the toolbar at the top. You can create a ribbon bar. You can put a button within the row. So we're not going to add any buttons in this particular example today. So we're just going to hit Next. And then these are alerts. So we are going to add an alert. So let's click the Add button. And then in the alert column, this is the data that you want to evaluate. So I want to look at our requested ship date. And I'm going to change this to a less than, and I'll tell you why here in a second. I'm going to click these little ellipses right here. And I could compare that to see if the date's lesser than a different date from my select, you know, the data that I'm working with in my grid. But I'm going to use this feature here that says today's date plus or minus. I'm going to say today's date +2. And the reason I'm going to do that is because these are orders that should be shipping urgently. So I'm going to give it what my alert means. And again, in the grid I showed you a sample of, we saw the colors at the top. So that's sort of the legend for if you have more than one alert. And so I'm going to hit Next. And then this is where you would hook up the detail grid. So the example, again, that I showed you had an order header in the top and detail in the bottom. Now I happen to combine those two things into one SQL statement. So I'm showing header and detail data all in the same grid, so we're not going to hook up a detail grid, but the way it works is you design the main grid and then you design the detail grid. And in this section of the main grid, you would go look up the component of the name of your detail grid and connect it right here. So we're just going to hit next past this. It shows us some XML, and then we're back to our settings. So at this point, we're done. I'm going to hit apply and OK. And now we have our open orders. And what I'm going to do is right click and say preview. And this is what our grid looks like. So the first thing I notice is it really doesn't look very nice. So the column headings are the actual field names from the database. So we give you the ability to change that. So if you go under display in format, and you can do mass format. And what that does is it goes through and it cleans up these column headers and gives them a little bit more user-friendly name, spaces out the columns a little better. So this shipping date column, we haven't shipped any of these orders. They're status 1 order, so I'm just going to get rid of that. So you can drag that down here. And then I want to see my requested ship date because that's where my alert is. So I'm going to drag that over here closer to the beginning of my grid so that we can see that. And then I'm going to sort it so you can see that's got the furthest out orders first. So I'm going to click the column header, and there's our alert. So it looks like the pandemic had a major effect on this company because they stopped shipping orders for about 5 years, or no, 11 years, I guess. So we've got some pretty old data in here, but these orders need to get out. So, but I said in the PowerPoint that the purpose, we wanted to create this grid to be able to see things by our ship via codes, the number of orders that we have by ship via codes. So to do that, again, up here, we're going to go to this area where it says group by panel. We're going to click on that. And then main group by, detail would be if we had a detail grid as well, but we don't. So we're going to hit main group by. And then you'll notice it added this little area here with this light gray text that tells you that if you drag a column up here, you'll group by that column. So I'm going to group by my ship via code. And so now it breaks that whole grid of data down by ship via code. And I can take that one step further, and I can also group it by ship date. So now all of my FedEx orders, I know what days, what orders need to go out on what day. So you could take this grid even further, and you could put a button on here to that when you selected this ship date, you could hit a button and print all the pick tickets for these orders and send them out to the floor for the day, knowing that, you know, so you can really use these grids to design any view of data that you want of Macolas and see it all in one place. Some other things that we can do here is I can add a footer, again, from main grid, and then I can just right click and say I want to count. So what that does is it counts the number of orders that are in each of these categories. So now that I have my grid built out and looking like I want it to, I need to save it. So if you notice up here in the right-hand corner where my mouse is, the current layout says default. If I track back over here in the opposite corner, there's a save button. So that is, if I just hit save, which I just did, that is making the default layout look like what I just designed. If I would have hit the save as button, I could have gave it a new name and the default grid would have looked like it did when we first opened. So you could, if you have users that want to view data in specific ways, they have the ability to drag things around and format the grid like they want to and save their own layout, or you could build it that way for them. It's up to you. So Now that I've saved my layout, if I close this out and I hit preview, you'll notice that it opens in the format in which I created it. So the only last thing that we have to do here is to get this on a menu. I'm going to right click over here and say new group and call it DS Webinar and OK. And then I'm just going to drag this component down to here. And so now if I open up my Agility again and refresh, I think. Maybe I need to log out and log back in. There's my menu, and there's my grid. Okay, so that's how you create orders or a grid of orders in Agility Explorer.